pictures, and I've read an article in the New York Times, so you can ask me questions about it, but I probably won't be able to answer them. I think it only has roughly 200 beds from the article, but it looks less like a jail or prison than pretty much anything we've seen. It's got these outdoor courtyards, and actually the prisoners are out there taking care of the fence. They've got balconies in the cells, although it is contained. It's what I call the cells are actually more like little apartments. You see the kind of kitchenette. There's a lot of recreation opportunity, and here's another picture of a kind of cell or a dorm. A living area where the inmates can cook together, and conjugal visiting, which I thought would be a very good way to end my presentation. That is the last slide. So, questions, please.
Just a quick question, if I could, Jay. When we're talking about the vertical versus horizontal, how have the vertical jails accommodated growth over 10 years or 20 years or 40 years? How do they fit that into their paradigm?
Well, some of them have reserved. It is incredibly difficult to add on vertically. It's not. I'm going to say it's just not feasible because it's so disruptive. How do you get the materials in? The vibration, the dirt, the connection to mechanical systems is. I think it's effectively not a viable strategy. So you can reserve space adjacent to expand into, or you can consider, as facilities get to a certain scale, that it doesn't need to be any bigger right there. Once you need another substantial increment, you can build another facility, possibly of another type. For building in the downtown location, the principal reasons for being there are the link to court and to services. So those inmates who are going to court would typically be held in the downtown component, and others maybe in another area. So you need a strategy for the future, and it may or may not be immediately adjacent to the increment of vertical construction. Yes.
Dave Christensen of the Jail Planning Taskforce sent us that article on this.
Oh, okay.
And so we had a chance to read it.
Sure.
And in reading it, it seemed to me that they just kept talking about natural light all the time. And was this kind of constructed with the idea of bringing the natural light in?
Absolutely.
It seemed like it was really important to them.
Yes.
And you feel it's important?
I do. I think there's actually a substantial amount of research in areas that are not necessarily corrections that have shown that exposure to natural light has tremendous benefits. And, you know, one of the problems that we've observed in some jails that don't have natural light is that the inmates get completely off their normal rhythms of sleep, for example, light and dark. They're sleeping during the day. That's also sometimes a function of not having activities to participate in, and jail policy and so on. But everything I know about research on the subject suggests that it's quite important and helps reduce stress and regulate rhythms and so on. I think I saw a hand. Oh, okay, Marianne, and then in the back. Oh, no, in the back. I think I'm going to ask Dave to answer that. I'm just here for a couple of days. So. Pete. I'm sorry, Pete. Pete. I was looking at Dave and saying Pete.
Well, I'm Pete Dworkin. I'm a member of the Jail Planning Taskforce, and was voted in as chair against my will. No, just kidding. But I'm kidding about that. I'm actually happy to serve as chair and be part of the process. To answer your question, right now the Jail Planning Taskforce is a group of volunteers who are talking about all these issues, and we are tasked with making recommendations to the county council. We are planning on, one, our meetings are open to the public, and they're earlier in the morning, so they're hard to attend. We do have a public comment period if you're interested in taking a few minutes to tell us your concerns on different issues. Our agendas are available online. We're trying to get them available at least a few days before the meeting, but that's been difficult because we're all volunteers. We're drafting them just a few days before each meeting. Bottom line is, we're going to hold a couple of public forums on some of these issues for the public to give the Jail Task Force their ideas and input. Ultimately, we're going to make some recommendations to the County Council. And then I heard you say you weren't here earlier at the beginning. As Mr. Farbstein showed, there are months of process that have to go through, including probably the hiring of a consultant or project manager. And that's going to be up to the county leaders to decide how and when they want to take action on that. So we are, right now, the stage we're in is making recommendations as a planning task force to the county council, and ultimately the council and executive are going to make the final decisions. So in terms of public input, though, you're more than welcome to attend our meetings, to write emails, to send in written materials, and we'll take a look at that, take that into consideration in what we recommend to the council. Oh, yeah, for anyone who's interested, go to the county website, and on the left-hand side, I think it says Hot Topics or something like that. There's a link to the Jail Planning Task Force. Right now, the IT department and Perry Rice are putting up all the documents that we're gathering as part of the process, and they should be available for the public to look at. So you can click on those links. Our meeting schedule is there, and like I said, the meetings are open to the public with some short public comment periods, but we do intend on having some specific opportunities for the public to just come in and have a discussion about some of the issues that we know are very important, such as the number of beds, the location, horizontal versus vertical, all those issues. We definitely want to hear the public's comment on that. So,
just an
Bill.
observation, if I could, Pete. It sounds like it's going to be very difficult for the Jail Planning Task Force to meet its what they've been charged with in a council resolution to come back with specific recommendations on the size, the location, design, and alternatives without the assistance of a professional or relying on previous data. Yeah,
I think that's an accurate assessment. You know, we haven't made we have a work plan and we have our goals. Whether we can achieve the directive from the resolution that we make these recommendations by January, I don't know if that's going to be possible. This is all up for discussion, but I can tell you I don't think that the task force is going to be able to come up with a recommendation of a number of beds to a distinct number or a site. I think what we can do is narrow down the priorities that the community needs to focus on, that we're gathering through the information in our meetings and from the public comment, and hopefully communicate to the council what the priorities of this community are in building a new jail. Because I think, as you heard Mr. Farbstein say today, we need to figure out what those priorities are before we design it. We don't need to design it and then figure out what priorities fit in it. And so it's important for us to take in the public comment and make recommendations based on the priorities that the community and its leaders, people who step forward and try to work on these things, feel that are the best things to do. So, but the short part of your question is January is optimistic. Just turn it over back to him. No more for me. Okay. Thanks. Sure.
Yeah, I was just curious on the slide with the Contra Costa. That was, you said, kind of almost experimental. Is there any data that shows, or is there more or less repeat offending if an inmate is in that kind of an environment? How does that benefit, other than making a really nice environment for them to stay in, and the staff, which to me is very important to have a positive place for staff to work. Is there repeat offense, more or less the same?
Well, recidivism, which is what you're talking about, repeat offender, is an extremely important goal and measure of the performance of the justice system. I have no evidence that jail design or the quality of the environment affects recidivism one way or the other, just to be completely straight about it. the kinds of programs that you participate while you're in the facility, the kind of reentry programs or other supports that you might get when you leave the facility, the level of supervision and many other kinds of issues have been shown to affect recidivism. I don't know if you remember that list from WSIPP. Shows many programs to have beneficial effects, some in custody, some out of custody, but I wouldn't maintain that the environment does. I think there are good reasons for making what I'm calling a quality environment, but they have to do much more with what's going on in the facility, lowering stress, lowering vandalism, lowering violence, inmate to inmate and inmate to staff. A lot of good reasons for doing it, but I wouldn't pin recidivism to that one. Sure. Yes, I'm just going to sweep this way, if that's okay.
Two questions. One of them is, could you speak to, you mentioned correctional attitudes, like different attitudes and trends in how you design prisons or jails? Like, what are those correctional attitudes and how have they trended or changed in the last 10, 15 years?
Yeah, you know, I've been doing this since about 1975, so quite a number of years, and when I started, I think we were kind of, well, let's just put the pendulum off to this side. That's my left, you're right, but I did my left on purpose. But you know, there was a belief in rehabilitation and treatment programs. Gradually through the 80s and into the 90s, I think the pendulum swung to the opposite direction, and I'm calling that the right, whatever, it doesn't matter, but much more toward kind of the law and order, lock them up, throw away the key. Offenses or activities were criminalized that hadn't been criminalized before. Sanctions were ratcheted up. We had a huge growth in the populations of our jails and prisons. We directed a lot more resources to those. And I think now the pendulum is starting to swing back for a variety of reasons. You know, I come from California, and people are sometimes embarrassed about that, but, you know, and rightly so, probably. But, you know, our budget, like so many states, is in dire condition. We have been ordered by the federal court to reduce the population of our prisons by somewhere between 20 and 30,000 inmates. The governor and legislature, in their wisdom, I think it's actually a good idea, have come up with something they call realignment, which is going to move offenders toward the end of their sentences and on lighter offenses back into the county justice system with the theory that they're closer to home and that they can be served better there and transition better into the community. Just before the budget really crunched, they changed the name of the prison department from the California Department of Corrections to the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. So that's my evidence, kind of the pendulum swinging back, you know, toward rehabilitation. Unfortunately, I mean, they did a lot of serious work. They looked at a lot of what are called evidence-based programs, and that would be the kind of list, you know, that I had up from WISP or however you call it. And I think they had the very good intentions of implementing them and came right up against the budget crunch that has pretty well killed it, unfortunately. So philosophically, I think the intentions have shifted in this atmosphere of reduced resources. I think it's been harder and harder to actually implement some of those programs on the one hand. On the other hand, I think there's been increased pressure to look at what's cost effective and what works from a community safety point of view, and that means maybe locking up fewer people and having more programs. So does that answer your question?
It does, and I'm curious about how the consulting industry actually looks at the true internal rate of return to the community for lockout, keep them there for 30, 60, 90 days, 3 years, 5 years, whatever, as different from shorter but intense rehab. If there's any trends or...
Well, those studies are there, actually.
Okay, and you're familiar with those?
Yeah, and you can find them too online, or I can help you find them. Scanning over. Okay, in the back.
Did you say the federal government is requiring California
Well, I didn't say the federal government, it's the federal courts. I guess that's the federal government, but it's not the Obama administration, okay? I mean, it's it's the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals as upheld on appeal, so.
And it's only California that makes that?
It's the California prison system, but you will find systems all over the country, state and local correctional systems who are under court order to cap their populations.
Pierce County's under a master agreement right now.
Yeah. Dave, Dave.
I just wanted to know if, in any of your recommendations on programming for the jails, has there been part of that as a recommendation of any judicial changes that you would recommend that would affect jail size or location? It's kind of part of it. If you could make a recommendation that way, obviously you're not in control of that, it's just the jail. But part of something that would help the design is if there are other programs that were implemented.
Well, on a procedural basis, my recommendation would be to have a working committee representative of the justice system that really many counties have effectively instituted that, and it could be based on your Law and Justice Council, but that might be a bit too big and unwieldy. But input from the judges, who have a major role, the prosecuting attorney, and the other kind of players, the public defender, the probation functions, the social services, mental health services. Really, they all have an impact or can have an impact on the jail, and to create a forum where those things could be discussed together is really valuable. Yeah. Yes.
You showed us a lot of pictures of jails, but there wasn't much discussion of the courts. So my question is proximity of jails to courts. What's kind of the trend these days for what's the best mix of that, and are there problems if the courts and the jails aren't close together?
Well, I don't know if there's a trend because I've seen probably every variation that you can imagine, and a lot depends too on the willingness of the local jurisdiction and the players, the judges and the prosecutor and the public defender, to conduct some of the proceedings by video. So that has to be in the mix. If it's in the mix, then you're going to have less physical movement of inmates from the jail to the courts. Another variation, which you actually have here now and could continue in the future, is to have one or more courtrooms physically within the jail, so that you're moving the inmates at least within the fabric of the jail. But any set of alternatives that are being evaluated need to be looked at in terms of the likely volume of transportation of inmates to court. Video is really not appropriate for certain kinds of things. Trials, for example. You're not going to do trials by video, but then you're not necessarily moving a lot of inmates to the trials. The higher volume events, the first appearances and arraignments, you may or may not want to do them by video. It really depends on a discussion among the parties to figure out what's going to happen there. If it's more perfunctory, then maybe it's by video, but if you're actually trying to get things resolved, then at those hearings, as opposed to assigning counsel and setting it off to the next hearing, that's fine by video. If you're trying to accomplish something where people need to be together and talk about it, it's not so good by video. So,
is that one of those discussions you need to have earlier before you choose a site, if the site's going to be away from the courts?
Sure. Let's see, there was a question. Yes, thank you.
On the horizontal versus vertical jail, is there a lot of difference in the initial construction cost?
It can be cheaper to go horizontal, and you have then to go vertical. You've got elevators, you've got expensive footings and things. On the other hand, you've got a more compact structure, so it's got less perimeter, less roof. So there are some trade-offs, but it should be cheaper usually to build horizontal. You have simpler technologies that you can use. You can build it out of block, for example, instead of having to use a steel or concrete frame. So it can be cheaper to go horizontal, first cost.
What about maintenance over time?
I actually don't know the answer to that. Sorry. Yes.
Yes, on a vacated jail, have you seen any clever uses for like a mid-rise jail? For, say we're to vacate this, our current jail, is there any uses you've seen for that facility, or you're supposed to tear it down, or any ideas on that?
I don't know. It's the way we build jails, they're not very flexible, you know? I mean, they're made out of very heavy construction, and they're very durable, and they have a lot of little partitions in them, so they don't lend themselves to be offices or whatever. But so I don't know. I think you'd have to look on a case-by-case basis, and I don't know your jail well enough, or the alternative uses to see what possibly might fit. I don't know. It's worth looking at. Okay, well, thank you very much. I really enjoyed this. I really appreciate your coming out, and I hope you found it informative.